Imagine this. A quiet neighborhood where everything looks picture perfect. Green lawns, white fences, smiling neighbors. But beneath the surface, power and control can twist into something dangerous. This is the story of one family, an innocent wife, a newborn child, and a Navy SEAL father, about to face a nightmare that no one in their neighborhood saw coming. The sun was just beginning to rise over the suburban neighborhood of Willow Creek. It was the kind of place real estate agents advertised as the perfect community. Rows of neat houses with manicured lawns, identical mailboxes, and rules designed to keep everything looking pristine. For most people, this neighborhood was a symbol of comfort and safety. But for Sarah and Jack Miller, it was about to become something very different. Inside one of those houses, Sarah rocked her newborn son gently in her arms. The baby's soft cries filled the living room, and she whispered lullabies in between yawns. The past 2 weeks had been exhausting. Sleepless nights, constant feedings, and overwhelming emotions. But she wouldn't trade it for anything. Motherhood had changed her world. Jack stood in the doorway, leaning on the frame with his arms crossed. His tall frame carried quiet strength, the kind forged through years of military service. Most of the neighbors saw him only as the reserved husband who kept his head down. What they didn't know was that Jack was a Navy SEAL, a man trained to endure impossible conditions and fight enemies who never played fair. Yet, in this moment, he wasn't a warrior. He was a husband, a father, and a man desperate for peace after years of combat. Sarah looked up at him with tired but glowing eyes. "He finally fell asleep," she whispered. Jack gave a rare smile, walking closer and brushing his hand gently across the baby's head. For the first time in a long time, he felt content. The smell of coffee drifted in from the kitchen, mixing with baby powder and the faint scent of freshly cleaned laundry. This was the life he had dreamed about during endless deployments. The first weeks after moving into Willow Creek had seemed welcoming enough. Neighbors brought casseroles, flowers, and polite smiles. They congratulated the couple on their new baby and spoke warmly of the neighborhood. But beneath the friendliness, Sarah had noticed something else, an intensity in the way some residents asked questions, the way they watched. Hovering above all of it was the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, the HOA. To outsiders, the HOA was a committee meant to protect property values and maintain order. But to the residents, it was a different story. Rules here were strict, penalties swift, and compliance expected. Paint your door the wrong color? Fine. Leave a trash bin outside too long? Fine. The HOA was less a guardian of community standards and more an enforcer of control. Jack had little patience for such politics. After years of following military orders, the last thing he wanted was more rules. Still, he kept his head down and told Sarah not to worry. But Sarah couldn't ignore the warning signs. 2 weeks after the baby's arrival, she found a notice taped to their door. In bold letters it read, "Please remove the stroller from the porch area. This is in violation of neighborhood policy." She had laughed nervously at first, thinking it was just a formality. But something about the tone felt cold, almost like a threat. 3 days later, another letter arrived. This one was worse. "Noise complaints have been filed. Please ensure the child does not disturb other residents." Sarah had nearly dropped the paper. The baby was barely 2 weeks old. What kind of neighbor would complain about a newborn crying? Her hands shook as she handed the letter to Jack. Jack's jaw clenched. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. He wanted to storm into the HOA office right then and demand answers, but Sarah begged him not to escalate things. "Please, Jack," she said softly. "We just got here. I don't want to make enemies already." Reluctantly, Jack agreed, tucking the letter into a drawer. But the soldier inside him stayed alert. He knew hostility when he saw it, even if it came wrapped in polite stationery. From then on, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were always on her. When she walked the baby down the street in his stroller, she noticed curtains twitching. Neighbors smiled, but the smiles lingered too long. Some asked questions that didn't feel casual. "How old is he? Does he sleep through the night? Do you have help, or is it just you?" Sarah would answer politely, but unease grew in her chest with every interaction. One evening, just as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Sarah was out walking when Mrs. Bennett, one of the older residents, stopped her. "He's adorable," she said, leaning in too close to peer at the baby. 2 weeks old, is he?" Sarah nodded, feeling protective. Mrs. Bennett's smile faltered just slightly before she added, "Well, you know the HOA likes to keep track of all new additions to the community." Her words were casual, but the way she said them made Sarah's stomach tighten. That night, Sarah told Jack what had happened. Jack's expression darkened, though he tried to brush it off. "She probably didn't mean anything by it," he said. But deep down, he didn't like it either. People didn't keep track of babies. Not in normal communities. The tension grew in small, unsettling ways. One afternoon, Sarah noticed a car idling near their house for nearly 20 minutes. The driver never got out, just sat there with the engine running. When she stepped outside, the car pulled away slowly, as if trying not to draw attention. Another time, she swore she saw someone standing across the street at night, half hidden by a tree, just watching. By the time Jack came to the window, the figure was gone. Sarah started to dread checking the mailbox. Each envelope from the HOA made her heart race. The notices were becoming more specific. All visitors must be reported. Outdoor toys should not clutter the yard. One even mentioned their baby's car seat being left near the garage. It was as if someone was tracking their every move. Jack tried to reassure her, but he knew something wasn't right. His instincts, honed through years of surviving dangerous missions, told him this wasn't random. This was targeted. Someone within the HOA had an interest in their child, and they were using their authority to pressure the family. But for now, Jack kept silent. He didn't want to alarm Sarah more than she already was. He told himself that maybe it was just paranoia, that maybe things would calm down. Still at night, as he lay awake listening to his son's soft breathing, he couldn't shake the sense that they were being watched. One morning, Sarah stepped onto the porch and froze. Another notice was taped to the door. This one was different. The language was sharper, colder. Failure to comply with HOA guidelines regarding your child will result in further action. She read it 3 times, her chest tightening. Guidelines regarding your child? What did that even mean? When she handed it to Jack, his expression hardened into something she hadn't seen since his military days. His eyes narrowed, his jaw set. For weeks, he had stayed silent, playing along to keep the peace. But now he knew this wasn't about lawn rules or noise complaints. This was about their baby. Jack folded the notice carefully, slid it into his pocket, and said in a low, steady voice, "They've crossed a line." Sarah stared at Jack, her hands trembling as she held the latest HOA notice. The words burned in her mind. Guidelines regarding your child. She wanted to believe it was just poorly phrased, a misunderstanding, but Jack's silence told her otherwise. He slid the paper into his pocket, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "We'll handle this." His calm tone reassured her, but the steel in his eyes made her realize that something had shifted. The next morning, Sarah tried to focus on the baby instead of the ominous letter. He was growing so fast already. His tiny fingers wrapped tightly around hers, his sleepy smiles melting away her exhaustion. Rocking him in the nursery, she whispered, "You're safe. Mommy and Daddy won't let anything happen to you." She wanted to believe it with all her heart. Jack spent more time at home now, watching the house closely when Sarah took the baby for walks. He had learned to read threats in the smallest details. An unfamiliar car, a lingering glance, a question that went too far. But Sarah insisted they keep living as normally as possible. "I don't want to be afraid in my own neighborhood," she told him. So, together, they stepped back into community life. At first, the neighbors seemed genuinely warm. The Johnsons next door brought over a basket filled with diapers, formula, and a tiny blue blanket embroidered with the baby's initials. "Every new family needs a little help," Mrs. Johnson said with a smile that reached her eyes. Sarah felt her shoulders relax for the first time in days. Maybe, she thought, she was just imagining the hostility. Other neighbors followed suit. A group of kids down the street drew chalk art on the sidewalk, spelling out "Welcome Baby" in bright colors. Someone left a bouquet of daisies on the porch with a card that simply read, "Congratulations." These gestures made Sarah feel included, and she let herself enjoy the kindness. But not all the reactions were so innocent. One afternoon, Mr. Turner, a tall man with sharp features and a clipboard always in hand, stopped by as Sarah was pushing the stroller. "Cute little guy," he said, peering into the carriage. His eyes lingered a moment too long. "Has the HOA received the proper documentation for him yet?" Sarah frowned, unsure she had heard correctly. "Documentation?" she asked. "Of course," Turner replied smoothly. "All new residents must be registered with the association. Pets, vehicles, children, it's all part of maintaining order." She forced a polite smile, but inside her stomach churned. The way he listed children in the same breath as pets and vehicles made her skin crawl. "I'll check with my husband," she said quickly, pushing the stroller away. That night, when she told Jack, his face darkened. "No one documents our son," he said flatly. His tone left no room for discussion. Still, Sarah tried to cling to the happier moments. She organized a small gathering in their backyard to introduce the baby to a few friendly neighbors. Laughter and chatter filled the air, and for a while, everything felt normal. The baby slept peacefully in a bassinet nearby, while Sarah shared stories of his first smiles and sleepless nights. But even at this gathering, unease crept in. Mrs. Bennett, the same woman who had made the unsettling comment weeks earlier, arrived uninvited. She hovered near the bassinet, asking question after question. Does he sleep through the night yet? What hospital was he born in? Is he circumcised? What's his blood type? Sarah's smile faltered with each question. They weren't the usual curiosities of a neighbor. They felt invasive, clinical, as though Mrs. Bennett was cataloging information. Jack noticed, too. He stepped forward, placing himself between Mrs. Bennett and the baby, his voice calm but firm. "He's healthy. That's all you need to know." The woman's lips tightened, but she backed away. After that, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the HOA wasn't just strict, they were fixated. Each week brought more letters. Some were petty. Complaints about the stroller wheels leaving marks on the sidewalk, or about visitors parking too long in the driveway. But others hinted at something deeper. The welfare of all community children is a top priority. One letter read. The HOA reserved the right to ensure proper care and compliance. Sarah sat at the kitchen table one evening, the baby asleep in her arms, rereading the letter with dread. "What do they mean, ensure proper care?" she whispered. Jack took the paper from her, folded it, and tossed it into the drawer with the others. "It means they're overstepping," he said. "And it stops now." Despite Jack's reassurances, Sarah felt the walls closing in. On her next walk, she noticed that people didn't just smile anymore, they stared. Groups of neighbors fell silent when she passed, only to resume whispering as soon as she was out of earshot. At the playground, a mother leaned toward another and murmured something while pointing at the stroller. Both women glanced at Sarah with expressions that were hard to read, part curiosity, part disapproval. One night, as Jack rocked the baby to sleep, Sarah sat across from him, her eyes wide with worry. "They're obsessed with him," she said. "Why? He's just a baby." Jack's gaze hardened. "Because people like that crave control, and they see him as something to control." The next day, another letter arrived, this one marked urgent. Sarah hesitated before opening it, her hands clammy. The words made her blood run cold. "Failure to submit the requested information regarding your child will result in mandatory review by the HOA board." She read it aloud to Jack, her voice breaking. His jaw clenched, and for the first time, he didn't try to calm her. Instead, he stood, walked a window, and stared out at the darkened street. His voice, when it came, was low and steady. "They've made this personal." For Sarah, the days that followed blurred into a cycle of fear and fragile moments of happiness. Every smile from her son gave her strength, but every shadow across the street filled her with dread. She couldn't escape the feeling that the HOA was circling closer, testing boundaries, waiting for her to crack. Jack, on the other hand, grew more focused. He watched patterns, noted who lingered near the house, tracked the times letters appeared. His training had taught him to study enemies before striking, and though this was no battlefield, the instincts were the same. He was preparing, silently, for whatever came next. By the end of the month, the line between ordinary neighborly interest and something far darker had blurred completely. The happy arrival of their baby, once filled with joy and celebration, had become the center of unwanted attention. The warmth of Willow Creek was fading, replaced by whispers, stares, and the suffocating presence of an HOA that seemed less concerned with lawns and paint colors and more obsessed with their child. Sarah clutched her baby close one evening, rocking him as tears slipped down her cheeks. "Why can't they just leave us alone?" she whispered. Jack placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice calm but resolute. "Because they don't know who they're dealing with. But they will." The kitchen drawer was nearly full now, stuffed with folded HOA notices that Sarah couldn't bring herself to throw away. Each paper carried the same sterile tone, the same cold insistence that the family was somehow failing to comply with neighborhood standards. Some letters were vague, others oddly specific, but all of them made her stomach twist. One morning, Sarah found a fresh envelope taped to the door. She hesitated before peeling off, her hands clammy. Inside, the letter read, "Your child's cries have been reported during nighttime hours. Please take steps to ensure he does not disturb community peace." Her breath caught. She read the sentence twice, then 3 times. The baby was barely a month old. Crying was natural, inevitable. She pressed the paper against the counter and whispered to herself, "They can't be serious." When Jack came in from the backyard, sweat still on his brow from morning exercise, she handed him the notice. His eyes flicked over the words, his jaw tightening. "They're pushing," he muttered, "seeing how far they can go." Sarah sank into a chair, clutching the baby to her chest. "But it's not even reasonable, Jack. He's a baby. What do they expect me to do, make him silent?" Jack crouched down in front of her, resting a steady hand on her knee. "They expect you to feel pressured. They expect us to bend. But we won't." His calm, commanding tone reassured her. But deep down, Sarah felt cracks forming in her resolve. 2 days later, another letter arrived. This one criticized the family for leaving the stroller near the porch overnight. Such clutter negatively impacts neighborhood aesthetics, it read. Sarah groaned, rubbing her temples. It was raining. I didn't want to drag it through the house. The constant nitpicking felt deliberate, like someone was watching their every move, waiting for the smallest misstep. When she told Jack, he scanned the street to the living room window, his eyes narrowing as he tracked the rows of quiet houses. Curtains shifted. A car engine started. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked. "They're watching," he said flatly, noticing things you'd only see if you were paying very close attention. That realization made Sarah's skin prickle. She began second-guessing everything. Where she parked the stroller, how long the baby cried, even how many visitors she allowed. Friends who came to help with a newborn began whispering about the atmosphere in Willow Creek. "It's like everyone's staring," one of her friends said uneasily. "I don't like it here." The tension only escalated at night. Twice, Sarah was woken not by the baby, but by faint sounds outside the house. Footsteps on gravel, the soft squeak of a gate opening, the distant crunch of tires on asphalt. Each time, Jack slipped silently from bed, moving to the dark house like a shadow, checking every window, every door. When he returned, his expression was grim but controlled. "No one's getting in," he assured her. But Sarah could see it in his eyes. He wasn't just being cautious. He was preparing for something. One afternoon, Sarah received an envelope unlike the others. Instead of being taped to the door, it was slid directly under the mat. She unfolded it with shaking hands. The words made her blood run cold. The HOA reserved the right to conduct wellness checks on all community children. Be prepared for a scheduled visit. She felt dizzy, gripping the counter for support. Her baby, resting in a bassinet nearby, stirred and whimpered. Sarah rushed to scoop him up, holding him tight as if the words on the paper could somehow reach through the walls and take him away. When Jack read the letter, his expression hardened into stone. "They're trying to make it official," he said. "Turn their obsession into policy." Sarah's voice cracked. "Jack, they're not just harassing us. They want him. They actually want him." Jack placed both hands on her shoulders, his gaze steady and unwavering. then they'll have to go through me first. Over the next week, the notices came faster. One accused them of excessive visitors after Sarah's sister stayed the night to help with the baby. Another warned against unauthorized equipment when Jack set up a baby monitor camera near the porch. Each letter dripped with the same smug authority, the same veiled threats. Sarah began dreading the walk to the mailbox, her heart racing with every new envelope. She stopped sleeping deeply, waking at the faintest sound. Her dreams blurred with her fears. Strangers in her home, her baby taken from her arms, faceless figures in HOA uniforms demanding compliance. Jack, meanwhile, grew sharper. He noted the timing of the letters, tracked which board members lingered near their house, memorized every face that watched Sarah on her walks. He didn't voice all of his thoughts, but Sarah could tell his mind was working constantly, strategizing. The breaking point came late one afternoon, when Sarah was feeding the baby in the living room. A sharp knock echoed at the door. She froze, startled, then carefully stood, cradling her son as she peeked through the peephole. 2 HOA members stood on the porch, both wearing matching polo shirts with the association's logo. One was Mr. Turner, with his ever-present clipboard. The other was a woman Sarah didn't recognize, tall with glasses perched on her nose. Mrs. Miller. Turner called smoothly, as though this were a friendly visit. "We'd like to have a word about community compliance." Sarah's heart pounded. She stayed silent, clutching her baby closer. Turner waited a moment, then added, "It would be in your best interest to cooperate." Before Sarah could respond, heavy footsteps sounded behind her. Jack appeared, moving to the door with controlled precision. He opened it just wide enough to step into the frame, his tall form blocking their view of Sarah and the baby. "This isn't a good time," Jack said evenly. Turner's polite smile didn't falter. "We've had several complaints regarding your child. We need to discuss corrective measures." Jack's voice dropped lower. "You don't need anything from my family. If you have something official, send it in writing." The woman beside Turner adjusted her glasses, her eyes flicking toward the inside of the house. A wellness inspection might settle these concerns quickly. Jack cut her off, his voice firm as steel. "No one inspects my child. Conversation's over." He shut the door with finality, the lock clicking into place. Sarah exhaled shakily, her knees weak. Jack stood there for a long moment, his hand still on the doorknob, his shoulders tense. Finally, he turned to her and said, "It's starting." That night, as Sarah rocked the baby to sleep, she couldn't shake the memory of Turner's voice. "It would be in your best interest to cooperate." The words echoed like a threat, heavy and menacing. For the first time, she admitted to herself that she was truly afraid, not just of the HOA, but of what they might be willing to do. She glanced at Jack across the room. He was sitting at the table, unfolding every letter they had received, spreading them out in a careful line. He studied each one like a soldier studying intelligence reports. His eyes were sharp, his expression unreadable. "Jack," she whispered, "what are we going to do?" He looked up, his voice calm, controlled, but carrying a weight she had never heard before. "We're going to fight back. But first, we let them think we're still playing their game." Sarah hugged her baby close, whispering into his tiny ear, "Mommy won't let them hurt you." But deep down, she knew this was no longer about strollers or noise or notices. This was war, and the first signs of battle had already begun. The air in Willow Creek shifted in ways Sarah couldn't quite explain. It wasn't just the letters anymore. It was the silence that fell when she stepped outside, the way neighbors seemed to pause mid-conversation when she passed, the weight of eyes that followed her across trim lawns. Something was building, something ugly. One Tuesday morning, she gathered the courage to take her son out in the stroller. The baby, bundled in a soft blue blanket, slept peacefully as she walked slowly down the sidewalk. For a brief moment, Sarah almost felt normal again. But that illusion shattered when 3 figures approached from the opposite end of the street. It was Turner, clipboard in hand as always, flanked by 2 other HOA members. Their identical polo shirts and calculated strides made them look less like volunteers and more like patrol. Sarah's throat tightened as they neared. Mrs. Miller. Turner greeted with forced politeness. His eyes flicked down at the stroller. "We need to speak with you about an urgent matter." Sarah's grip on the stroller's handle tightened. "Whatever it is, you can leave it in writing like always." Turner shook his head slowly, his smile thin. "This isn't something we'll reduce to paper. It requires a direct conversation." The woman beside him, tall, severe, with a sharp bob haircut, stepped forward. "For the well-being of the community," she said crisply, "we must ensure that your child is being raised in a safe and controlled environment. Given the complaints, it may be best if custody is temporarily transferred." Sarah froze, her mind blank for a second. Then the word struck like a thunderclap. "Excuse me?" Her voice cracked with disbelief. Turner nodded slightly, as though confirming a routine decision. "It's in everyone's best interest, Mrs. Miller. The board believes a child may be better cared for under HOA supervision until things stabilize in your household." Her heart began to pound so hard she thought her chest would break. "You're insane," she whispered. "You can't even think that you're right." The third member, a middle-aged man with graying hair, spoke for the first time. His tone was calm, almost pitying. "Refusal won't make this easier. We're trying to prevent escalation." Sarah pushed the stroller back a step, her hands trembling violently. Her baby stirred and whimpered, as if sensing the tension. Every instinct in her body screamed to run, to get away, but her legs felt rooted to the pavement. "You want me to hand over my baby to you?" she said, her voice louder now, wavering with rage and fear. "You don't have that power. You don't have that authority." Turner raised his hands, as though calming her. "Don't get emotional. We're offering you a path forward. Resistance will only create consequences neither of us wants." Sarah's stomach turned. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a threat. Her eyes darted up and down the street, but no neighbors intervened. Curtains shifted. Doors remained shut. Everyone was watching, but no one was stepping in. Jack wasn't home. He had gone for a short run to clear his head. Sarah felt naked without him there, exposed. She bent slightly over the stroller, shielding her baby with her body, her voice shaking but defiant. "You come near him again, and I'll scream this whole neighborhood awake," she hissed. "You think you're powerful, but you're not above the law." For the first time, Turner's smile faltered. His jaw tightened, and something colder replaced his facade of politeness. "Careful, Mrs. Miller. You'll find that in this community, the board is the law." Those words shattered her remaining composure. Tears burned in her eyes, but she held them back, refusing to give him the satisfaction. She spun the stroller around and hurried away, nearly tripping in her haste. Behind her, she could feel their eyes drilling into her back, could hear the low murmur of voices. By the time she reached her front porch, she was sobbing. She yanked the stroller inside, locked the door, and collapsed against it, clutching her baby. "They can't have you," she whispered fiercely into his tiny ear. "They'll never have you." When Jack returned minutes later, drenched in sweat, he found Sarah rocking back and forth on the living room floor. Her face was streaked with tears, her whole body trembling. They told me to give him up," she stammered, her voice broken. Jack dropped to his knees in front of her, gripping her arms. "What do you mean?" "Who told you?" "The HOA," she choked out. "Turner. And others. They said it would be better if they took him. That they'd care for him." Jack's eyes darkened, his expression hardening into something Sarah had never seen in civilian life, but knew from his military stories. The look of a man calculating threats, already mapping out responses. His breathing steadied, slow and deliberate. "They asked for my son?" His voice was low, dangerous. Sarah nodded, fresh tears spilling over. "They won't stop, Jack. They'll come again. And I don't know what to do. I'm so scared." Jack pulled her and the baby into his arms, holding them tightly. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "They don't get to touch him. They don't get to touch you. They cross a line today, and they'll regret it." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made her flinch. She stayed curled in bed with the baby at her side, while Jack sat awake in the darkened living room, watching the street through the blinds. His mind raced with scenarios, preparing himself for what felt inevitable. At 2 a.m., a shadow passed across the front yard. Jack's eyes narrowed, muscles tense. He remained still, tracking the figure until it disappeared around the corner. No knock came, no sound followed, but the message was clear. The HOA wasn't done. They were circling, waiting, testing. The next morning, another letter appeared. This one wasn't folded neatly or worded with bureaucratic politeness. It was scrawled in bold black marker, shoved into their mailbox. Hand over the baby before it's too late. Sarah's scream when she found it echoed through the house. Jack took the note from her shaking hands, his face carved into stone. He didn't speak for a long time. Then finally he said, "They just made their declaration." Sarah collapsed into a chair, her sobs raw and unrestrained. The pressure had broken her resolve. She couldn't eat, couldn't breathe without fear. She clung to her baby as though her arms alone could shield him from the world. Jack, however, grew colder, calmer, every muscle in his body honed by training. He gathered every letter, every notice, every threat, and laid them out across the dining table like battle plans. "This isn't harassment anymore," he said, his voice quiet but deadly serious. "This is war." The morning after the threatening note, Sarah moved through the house like a ghost. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her voice raw from repeating the same words over and over to her baby. "You're safe. Mommy won't let them take you." But her reassurances rang hollow even to herself. Jack had left early, saying he needed to clear his head with a long run, but Sarah knew the truth. He was scouting. Every instinct in him was awake now, alive to the threat. He needed to see the neighborhood with a soldier's eyes, to spot the angles and vulnerabilities that ordinary people overlooked. Sarah, meanwhile, stayed inside with the baby, curtains drawn, nerves stretched thin. The air felt heavy, charged with something she couldn't name, but dreaded all the same. By mid-morning, the knock came. It was sharp, loud, deliberate, not the casual rap of a neighbor. This was a summons. Sarah froze in the hallway, her son cradled against her chest. The baby whimpered softly as though sensing her fear. She swallowed hard, then stepped slowly toward the door. Another knock thundered, this one harder. "Mrs. Miller," a voice barked from outside. "Open the door. We need to talk." Her blood turned to ice. She recognized the voice, Turner. She gripped the doorknob but didn't open it. "You can leave whatever you need in writing," she called back, her voice trembling. Turner's reply was sharp, clipped. "This isn't optional. You've ignored notices, refused cooperation, and now the board has serious concerns. Open the door or we'll take further action." Her hand shook violently. She wanted to scream at him to go away, but fear locked her throat. Instead, she clutched the baby tighter, rocking instinctively. "You have no right," she whispered, though it was more to herself than to them. Through the peephole, she saw them, Turner, flanked by 2 more HOA members. They weren't smiling. They weren't pretending to be polite anymore. Their postures were stiff, their faces hard, as if they had abandoned all pretense of neighborly concern. One of them, the tall woman with the glasses, leaned close to the door. Her voice came low but cutting. "Mrs. Miller, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Hand the child over for evaluation. We'll make sure he's safe." Sarah staggered back, shaking her head violently. "No," she whispered, clutching her son so tightly he began to squirm. Tears blurred her vision. You can't take him." The baby began to cry, his small wails echoing in the quiet house. From outside, Turner's tone sharpened. "You hear that? He's distressed. That's exactly why we need to step in. You're clearly overwhelmed." Sarah's heart cracked. They were twisting her baby's cries into evidence against her, and she couldn't stop it.